Toronto Maple Leafs just robbed the NHL as we have breaking news surrounding the Leafs and Jake McCabe as they have finalized and agreed to an extension, and the number may surprise you. So we're going to break down the extension and discuss what it means going forward for this team and this defensive group. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, make sure to smash the like button. Let's try to reach 300 likes on this video. If you like this extension, hit that button. Now, Darius, some breaking news just came out surrounding Jake McCabe ahead of tonight's big game against the Winnipeg Jets, and we were kind of talking about how an extension seemed very likely at this point, as that was before the season started and as it was getting underway. Now we're 9 games into the season, and they finally got it done, and some pretty big news here because the contract is actually very intriguing and very good. So Jake McCabe, 5 years at $4.51 million with Toronto. And there's a ton of things to go over here. There is money deferred as a part of this deal between years 2 and 3. Drops the AAV from 4.7 to 4.51. Before we get into the rest of the details about this extension, I just want to get your thoughts on it, Darius. What are your thoughts on this deal? They now have Jake McCabe locked up for 5 more years into his age 36, I believe, season.
The details are very intriguing, and we're starting to see a lot more of the deferred money route from teams in the NHL, especially this past offseason. This is the first contract that the Leafs are doing that, but we'll get to that in a second. In terms of the contract itself and the player, I mean, in terms of years, it's going to take him till he's about 36, right? So he's going to be a bit older, and the Leafs back end is very old at this point, or it's going to be. It's getting there. And I think Brad Treliving likes that, an older, more experienced back end, which is fine, but at some point it is going to bite them. So you have to, take a look at that for sure. But Jake McCabe is a very good defenseman, 28 points last year in just over 70 games played. So a very good season from McCabe. He didn't really have that many points when he first came to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second half of the season before that. And he's a very effective second pairing guy. We've seen it. I love the way he plays. He brings that tenacity, right? That stuff, the mean streak, the stuff that the Leafs need more of. And I think sometimes in games that they're out of and they're losing, he brings the physicality still. And I like to see that. And I noticed that against Columbus last week in a terrible game, but I thought he was a little bit of a bright spot in that way. So it's a great deal. I thought that this player, on the open market, he'd probably get $6 million. And I was expecting him to get somewhere in between 5 and 6. We made a video on it like not too long ago. So I was really expecting him to get between 5 and 6. So for it to be 4.5 and for 5 years with the salary cap continuing to go up, it's a great deal for the Leafs. It's a great deal for McCabe because he's still making some pretty good money, of course. And he's a very effective defenseman for them right now. And the Leafs are looking to win a Stanley Cup right now. You can talk about how old their back end is all you want, but they want to win a Stanley Cup either this season or the next. And I think that's all they really care about. So they locked up McCabe, and it's looking good for the next couple of years.
Yeah, fans seem to be very happy with this deal. And again, and most projections had it at around 5.5 million over 5 years, and they got that down. They saved, according to that projection, about $5 million over the term of this contract. And with the contract, extending for 5 years and the cap going up, it's only going to get better and better with each year, in theory, cap-wise. Now, the actual contract, we'll discuss it in a minute. The defensive core in 2 or 3 years from now might be a little bit aging, and well, that's the best way to put it. But while that's the current cap, the deal is actually $23.5 million over 5 years. There is some deferred money to bring down the cap while increasing the take-home money and maximizing tax efficiency. So, like we've seen from Brad Treliving and everyone who does the numbers the whole time, they're really maximizing the cap well here. The only blemish on that would be, of course, the Timothy Liljegren one here, and his player is super interesting. Really reasonable AAV for someone who could have demanded a lot more per year on the open market. Jake has a passion. And you're looking at him, his stats so far throughout the year, he's been very impressive. Not necessarily on the score sheet or anything like that, but just the way he's been playing. If you look at the impact charts, he's been near the top in a lot of the the 9 games that they've played so far. Last season, he was very effective. So I think he's going to be very good deal throughout the whole next couple of years at the very least of the contract. But he is only 31 years old. He's not Tanev's age. OEL's age, they're a couple years older, but this core now of OEL, Riley, Tanev, and now Jake McCabe is very good for the next couple years, though I see some fans concerned out there about what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years from now when they're all in their mid to late 30s.
Yeah, if you look at their impact chart, or his impact chart, at least for the first couple games of this season, he's usually or rarely in the negative impact, right? He's usually in the positive. He's not necessarily the best player on the ice all the time, but he's hovering around the middle of the pack or the top of the chart, and it's usually a positive impact, which is a very good thing, obviously, right? So, and we've seen that from OEL as well, and they've been a pairing, so they've been very good this year. But yes, like you mentioned, I mean, the back end is getting a little bit older. It's something you have to consider. But the way I see it right now is, again, the Toronto Maple Leafs are trying to win a Stanley Cup either this year or next year, maybe 3 years. I think that's their window at this point, especially with some of the guys they have on the team. I'm not sure Tanev's going to make it past year 3 or 4 of that contract. We all kind of knew that when it was signed. Same with OEL. They're extending the length of these contracts to be able to get the AAV down. And now with Jake McCabe in this contract, obviously deferred salary, the first time the Leafs are doing that. So they're trying to get creative. It's not necessarily that they're going to have these players on the team for 5 or 6 years. They're just getting creative to fit them under the cap right now, and they'll figure it out later because they're looking to win a Stanley Cup, like I've been saying, in the next 2 to 3 years. And some people will laugh at that, but that is their goal. It's cup or bust for them at, in some way at this point. So getting this guy locked up, who's been a big part of this team, right? And you want more guys to kind of play like him, is a really good thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs moving forward. And they needed to get it done, because if you let this go to the offseason, McCabe might be looking at more money from other options, and maybe he's getting more play time on certain teams, maybe a worse team, right? So I'm glad that they got this done pretty early in the season, actually.
Yeah, it opens up some flexibility going forward, whether that's in the offseason, whether that's just addressing needs at this trade deadline now. I mean, they have their blue line locked up for the foreseeable future, at least the core of it, including, don't forget, Benoit signed an extension as well. You have Yanni Hakanpää, who's on this one-year deal only. So they have a lot of depth this season and beyond at the blue line. And being able to structure it with deferred money, we're seeing it around the NHL. We're seeing it around a lot of major sports leagues. Obviously, baseball has had it as well with Ohtani and things like that, but to a much lesser degree than, of course, than in the MLB. But it's very interesting. And the thing now is that you mentioned it, other teams would have probably given him 5x5 without even thinking about it. He's exactly what the Leafs need, and clearly Craig Berube fits into his play style, skates well, hits well. His offense has been very solid. He had 8 goals last year, and he's not a perfect player. If you look at his JFresh chart, he's a very 83% or 83 WAR player. He's been positive in almost every aspect of the game. When you're comparing other comparables here, he almost certainly would have got 5x5, maybe depending if he goes to the open market, 5x6, on depending how, of course, deep the free agency class is. And if you're interested in the actual numbers, most of McCabe's year 1 money comes in signing bonus, while years 2 to 4 also include some payout with no bonus in year 5. Total annual breakdown: 6, 5.5, 4.8, 3.6, 3.6. So at least it's interesting how it goes. 3.6 and 3.6 in his age 35, 36 season. It might seem a little bad, but by that time the cap is going to be a bit higher, so it won't be quite the same hit. I think they robbed the NHL with this contract. I think many other teams would have offered him more, and he maybe took a little bit of a discount to stay in Toronto and to lock up, because you never really know, injuries and things like that happen. So any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a player that they needed to lock up. He plays exactly like the style of hockey that Toronto Maple Leaf fans want so badly, not just now, but over the course of the last 30, 40 years, the style of hockey that they really like. So I'm glad that they locked him up. And like you said, he's a very effective player. Every chart you look at, like he's in the positive. He's doing good things for the Leafs, and he's on a. I thought it was an interesting pair coming into the season, but it's worked out so far, and obviously they're playing with that. But if you look to the future, yes, they have an older back end, but they're trying to win right now. That's the goal. And eventually, in a few years' time, I'm sure they're going to be able to move off some of these contracts, whether it be ROBBED Island, if you want to call it that, or via trade or something, because by year 4 or 5 of this contract specifically, you hope that guys like Ben Danford are in the lineup then, right? So or taking steps to get there, some of their defensive prospects. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And I think it's a great contract, especially for the short term. And the Leafs, they needed to get this done. I'm glad they did, and it's a good contract.
Yeah, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. They do play the Winnipeg Jets, the last undefeated team in the NHL. And we will be going live after the game, so make sure to tune into that. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.